What was the one thing that made Xbox stand out when it launched back in 2001? Was it The Rock?
Fascinating. Yeah, I might want to use that sometime.
Was it the Duke controller that I could barely fit my hands around at the time?
If you put your hands on top of mine?
No. It was split screen. But split screen gaming is dying. No more split screen in Halo. No more split screen in Motorsport. And apparently the Series S is incapable of running split screen for newer games. Is this the end of split screen? Is it hurting the video game industry? Is it hurting fans? Is it hurting you? Let's discuss. So despite what your parents may have told you, oh, you spend all your life, you're wasting away your days playing video game locked up in your room, there's always actually been a social aspect in video games, dating all the way back to the days of arcades. People gathering in one physical space and communally experiencing different games, whether it's like Dig Dug or Street Fighter or any number of games. In fact, one of the earliest video games was split screen, Drag Race. And once video games made their way over to the home console market, we just saw an explosion of multiplayer games or split screen games. I'm talking about like Pong and all the other knockoffs. And then once like the Sega Genesis came out, once the Super Nintendo came out, like it just exploded. By the time Xbox came around, they took that tradition, that social aspect, that communal aspect of gaming, and it became integral to their brand. You can make the argument that without split screen co-op, without multiplayer, Xbox wouldn't be where they are today. And in a lot of ways, that's what made the original Xbox experience so awesome. I mean, look at the original Xbox console. It has 4 controller ports on the front, very similar to what we saw Nintendo do with the N64 and even with the GameCube. Microsoft made this gaming console with the expectation that at some point their consumers were going to go and play games with at least one other person, or maybe even 3. Xbox almost became synonymous or very closely associated with things like epic LAN parties and like going over and just having like all-nighters with Halo or Gears, whatever your game of choice was. And interestingly enough, when you look at a lot of the old Halo marketing, or at least the lead up to what they did before Halo released, a lot of it is centered around, oh, you can play this game by yourself, or you can play it with other people. You can play it on the same console. You can hook up other consoles and play it together.
Everybody likes to go to their buddy's house and order pizza and get something to drink and wipe the Cheetos off your hands and jabbing each other and calling them names.
This is a point that they mention in live events and Q&As. It was very important to the identity of Halo and by extension, Xbox.
It's good to play together.
I can't help but look back on those times, like the peak of local multiplayer, split screen multiplayer, and think that was like, those were the best of times. I'm sure a lot of you are going to be like, get over it, old man. You're over here screaming at the clouds, being like, back in my day, video games, you could play on the same screen on the same console. But I think about it, and a lot of the stuff that frustrates us as a community about video games today just didn't exist back then. Because of split screen, because of local multiplayer. Even when games support split screen on Xbox today, you have to go through this really annoying process with a lot of games. Like, the people that you want to play with have to make their own Xbox profile. They got to sign up for a Microsoft account. They got to make their own name. It's like a whole thing where it used to be, again, I've said this a couple of times already, plug in the controller and you're good to go. I'm a big believer in video games, their ability to bring people together, the social aspect of gaming. And it's, I know it's taken on a different form, but I wish we still had that option to gather around physically in the same space and experience this game together.
The electronic game of the future, and the family's best foul weather friend.
Fast forward to today. Publishers, developers, split screen is like an afterthought to them. It's something that it's like, why even bother adding that in? It's just such a small percentage of users are actually going to take advantage of that feature. And not only that, we're seeing that iconic Xbox franchises that used to have split screen co-op, split screen functionality, they're doing away with it. It all started with the launch of Halo 5 back in 2015. And very controversially, they did not have split-screen co-op for the campaign. I even found this old post on Reddit, and this poor guy says, yeah, there's no split-screen in Halo 5, but it is going to be making its way back in Halo Infinite. Poor guy. Because as we all know, not only did Halo Infinite launch without campaign co-op, but when it eventually came to the game, they were like, yeah, there's not going to be any split-screen co-op. That's a shame, man, because every other Halo game has supported that. And while Halo Infinite, there is some split screen support, like you can do it on multiplayer. It's very, very limited. Like, you can't go and join more than 2 people split screen in big team battle. Like, there's all sorts of compromises that you have to make nowadays that you did not have to back in the day. And of course, if you want to play any local multiplayer game on your Xbox, you're going to need an extra controller, and lucky for you, I have links for all types of controllers beneath this video. We also got news the other day that the new Forza Motorsport not going to have split screen because they made the investment in graphics and performance. Which, that's all well and good, yes. You know, it's very cool to have like a graphically, technically, performance-wise, great-looking game, but it does make me sad a little bit. Like, if I were to travel back in time and explain to my younger self, oh, if you want to play Halo with your friends, they got to buy their own Xbox, and they got to buy their own copy of the game, and they have to have a separate TV to play on, that would seem backwards to me, honestly. That would seem like a step back. From a business perspective, I guess it's great for these companies because they're making double the money that they used to have instead of like 3 friends mooching off 1 copy of the game. But in the process, what are we losing? Now, for a lot of you watching this, probably not losing much, right? A lot of you are probably going to comment on this video and say, I haven't used split screen in any game in years. Which, you know, makes sense. Maybe the friends that you used to play split screen with or any kind of multiplayer with in person, maybe they've moved on from video games. Maybe they've moved across the country and you primarily game online. So why should you care? Well, split screen gaming is still fun, and with the right game, when it's done right, it could be a blast. And I feel like people are still hungry for that experience. We saw just a couple of years ago a game like It Takes Two surprise everyone. It's enjoyed by millions and ended up winning Game of the Year. More recently, I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3. And I am super impressed with the split screen functionality, the split screen support on that game. You can literally be doing entirely different things if you're playing split screen with a friend. I can be involved in like a cutscene where I'm making persuasion and deception checks, whereas my friend who I was playing with could be out like trading with people, getting into fights, exploring on their own. That seems like the evolution in gaming that I expected back when I was a kid. And speaking of Baldur's Gate 3, guys, I would love to sit here and tell you y'all aren't missing anything, but Baldur's Gate 3 is great. I've been enjoying myself immensely with this game. I'm like 20 hours in, but as you've probably heard at this point, the Xbox version of Baldur's Gate 3 has been delayed, specifically because the Series S cannot run split screen. Why is that a problem? Well, because Microsoft has this policy stating that every game that comes out on the Xbox platform has to have feature parity. It's okay if the game graphically looks different on the Series S, runs at a different resolution, at a lower frame rate. That's fine, but it has to have all the same gameplay features, including split screen. So when Larian Studios couldn't figure out how to get split screen running on the Xbox Series S, they had to say, okay, we have to delay the Xbox version for the S and the X, the whole kit and caboodle. Now I really do feel like an old man now. I'm saying kit and caboodle, all that stuff. Kit and caboodle, who says that anymore? And you know what, let's just move on. So now we're starting to see some real consequences of Xbox overlooking the importance maybe of split screen gaming. And if you look at the Xbox news cycle recently, you'll start to see articles from Forbes and Windows Central questioning whether or not Microsoft should drop this parity clause that they have for the Series S. should they make it an option, say, hey, if you can't get certain features running on the Series S, you can go ahead and ship the game anyway. The Windows Central article that I read kind of positions an interesting caution against that, because it could be a slippery slope if they're like, okay, maybe we drop split screen functionality or requirements for the Xbox Series S. What else can we drop? Or could we just totally bypass the Series S, not worry about it at all, just release a Series X port? It's a very interesting situation, and one that we wouldn't have known about had Larian Studios not come out and said, yeah, it's pretty much the Series S's fault that this game's not coming out on time for Xbox. Because up until this point, I was operating under the assumption that Xbox first-party studios, they were dropping split-screen support because they weren't interested in it, because it was a dying fad. It just wasn't a big deal anymore. And since games are getting bigger, more expensive to make, why dedicate resources to a feature that only a small percentage of your users are going to take advantage of? But now with this whole Baldur's Gate situation, I'm starting to question if there's something else at play. Sure, Xbox is probably not as interested in supporting local multiplayer or split-screen co-op as they were in the past. But I'm starting to think, are they incapable of doing split-screen multiplayer on their games? And is it because of the Series S? This is something that Xbox would never publicly speak on in the way that Larian Studios did, but if Larian Studios is having issues with it, then are some of their first-party studios having issues with it? If the Series S didn't exist, would we have split-screen co-op for Halo Infinite, Forza Motorsport? Would Starfield be 60 FPS on Xbox consoles? Is this a problem that goes beyond just split-screen multiplayer? Is it affecting other features as well? I used to think okay, third-party studios, maybe they can't optimize games super well for the Series S. Maybe they can't get certain features working on it because they're just not as, experienced with the hardware as maybe some Xbox first-party developers would be. But now we're starting to see that Xbox first-party are dropping those same features that we're seeing third-party developers do. 343 Industries, Turn 10 Studios, they're dropping split screen, they're dropping different features. It's a whole thing nowadays. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on the Series S. I think any budget console has a place in today's market. There are a huge amount of people who don't care about having the best looking games or the best performance out there. They just want a video game console. And to be honest, the cat's already out of the bag. Xbox has sold millions of these consoles, so they're gonna have to figure it out one way or the other. So, what do? For me personally, I don't think it's unreasonable to drop this parity clause between the S and the X, demanding that a game that launches on the Series platform has all of the same features between the two of them. In fact, maybe if you drop the parity clause, it would make buying an Xbox Series X that much more appealing and push more units out into the market. If Xbox came out and said, okay, if you want a cheap Xbox just to play the latest games, buy the Series S, but be aware you're going to have to make certain compromises, not only visually, but sometimes you won't get features like split-screen co-op in certain games. But if you don't want to make any compromises, buy the Series X. That's our top-of-the-line gaming machine. I don't think that's an unreasonable stance, because I feel like if you're an Xbox fan, you're an Xbox owner, you would probably much rather be playing Baldur's Gate 3 at the same time as everyone else versus waiting for Larian Studios and Xbox to figure out a way to get split-screen co-op working on the Xbox Series S. With the rise of online gaming, your Fortnite, your Apex Legends, Call of Duty, Overwatch, we'll probably never make it back to the time of peak split-screen co-op. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that because I've had a lot of fun playing those games that I just mentioned, but I feel like they're just taking the wrong lessons from those experiences. Rather than looking at games and multiplayer titles as a way to connect gamers and, enable them to have a ton of fun, these developers, these publishers are looking at it with just dollar signs in their eyes. They want to make the most amount of money. They want to, inject all of these battle passes into their, monetary kind of structure in order to keep people coming back and keep people paying money. And so they make a ridiculous amount of money. But even if we don't return to the peak days of LAN parties, gathering around the couch, playing games, I would really like to see Xbox and other publishers, at least explore having the option of local multiplayer, split screen. Xbox's generation, they've positioned themselves as a company, as a platform holder that wants to empower their fans to play however they want and whenever they want, whether it's on their Xbox console, whether it's on a PC, whether it's on the cloud. But there's some exceptions to that, right? Oh, we want you to play however you want, except if you want to play with multiple people on the same console, you playing the same game. At the end of the day, it's not about split screen. It's not about, oh, games back in the day were so much better than they are now. It's about losing what, in my opinion, is one of the best parts of video games. Gathering together, experiencing great epic story moments together, or being really frustrated together, being in a physical space and sharing those emotions with your friends, your family, your loved ones. And the way things are going right now, we may not ever get it back. We may not ever get back to those days. Or maybe I'm an old man. Maybe it's just changed shape. Maybe it's just evolved, and I just have to go along with it.